Imagine this. You come home late at night after a friendly card game. You walk through the door, expecting to see your wife. Instead, you find her lying on the floor, motionless, her body riddled with bullets. That was the nightmare Paul Solomon walked into on January 15th, 1989. His wife, Betty Jean, had been brutally murdered inside their own home. Shot 9 times. A crime so intimate, so violent, that investigators knew right away this wasn't random. This was personal, and the truth behind Betty Jean's murder would uncover a twisted web of lies, betrayal, and a forbidden love affair that spiraled into one of the most infamous crimes of passion America has ever seen. Betty Jean Solomon, the woman who lost everything. Betty Jean was the kind of woman people admired. A devoted mother, a kind neighbor, a hard-working wife. She loved her daughter fiercely, and she had stood by her husband Paul through years of financial struggles and marital challenges. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't flashy. She was steady, reliable, the foundation of her family. But Betty Jean had no idea that her seemingly ordinary life was about to collide with a woman who wanted everything she had and was willing to destroy it all to get it. Carolyn Warmus was 23. Beautiful, wealthy, ambitious. She had grown up in privilege and wanted a life filled with excitement. When she began teaching at the same school as Paul Solomon, she noticed him, and Paul noticed her. Soon, a secret relationship began. At first, it was passionate, intoxicating. For Paul, maybe it was just an escape from routine. But for Carolyn, Paul became an obsession. She wanted more. More time, more love, more commitment. And above all, she wanted Paul's wife out of the picture. As months passed, Paul pulled away, telling Carolyn he would never leave Betty Jean. But Carolyn refused to let go. She called constantly. She showed up uninvited. Friends described her as possessive, unable to imagine life without Paul. Every rejection cut deeper. Every time Paul went home to his wife, Carolyn's jealousy burned hotter. She wasn't content being the other woman anymore. She wanted it all. On the freezing evening of January 15th, 1989, Paul was out playing cards with friends. Their daughter was away at a sleepover. Betty Jean was home alone. Sometime that night, someone entered the house. What happened next was savage, brutal. Betty Jean was shot 9 times with a .25 caliber handgun. Not once or twice. 9 times. This wasn't a burglary. This wasn't random. This was rage, passion, hatred. When Paul returned home later, the scene that greeted him was a nightmare. His wife's lifeless body lay on the carpet, blood soaking through the rug. Detectives knew right away. This wasn't just murder. This was personal. And very quickly, a name surfaced. Carolyn Warmus. Investigators discovered that Carolyn had recently purchased a .25 caliber pistol. The same type of weapon used in the killing. Even stranger, on the very night Betty Jean was murdered, Carolyn had rented the film Fatal Attraction. The story of a scorned mistress who becomes violent when rejected by her lover. The parallels were chilling. It looked like Carolyn had turned fantasy into reality. But there was one big problem. The murder weapon was never found. Without it, the case was built entirely on circumstantial evidence. Carolyn went on trial in 1991. The prosecution painted her as a woman consumed by jealousy, driven to kill the wife of the man she couldn't have. The defense, however, argued there was no direct proof she pulled the trigger. And they pointed the finger back at Paul. Could the husband have been involved? Was he framing his mistress to save himself? The jury couldn't agree. The trial ended in a mistrial. But prosecutors weren't finished. In 1992, Carolyn was tried again. This time, the case was even more sensational. Witnesses testified to her obsession. The gun purchase was highlighted again and again. The movie rental, a haunting piece of circumstantial evidence, loomed over the trial like a ghost. The jury deliberated for days. And then the verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder. Carolyn Warmus was sentenced to 25 years to life. The media pounced on the case, branding Carolyn the fatal attraction killer. The story had it all: beauty, wealth, obsession, betrayal, and murder. It was the real-life version of the movie that terrified America just a few years earlier. Carolyn became infamous overnight. But she never admitted guilt. For decades behind bars, she insisted she had been framed. She claimed Paul set her up, that he had more motive to kill his wife than she ever did. And some people believed her. After 27 years in prison, Carolyn was finally released on parole in 2019. She walked free, but the shadow of Betty Jean's murder will follow her forever. So, what really happened that night in 1989? Was Carolyn Warmus truly the jealous lover who snapped in a violent crime of passion? Or was she the perfect scapegoat in a case with too many secrets? Betty Jean is gone. Paul Solomon's reputation never recovered. Carolyn Warmus lost nearly 3 decades of her life. 3 lives shattered, all because of a love triangle built on lies and obsession. This was the story of Carolyn Warmus, the so-called fatal attraction killer. But here's the part that still divides people more than 3 decades later. Did Carolyn Warmus really pull the trigger? Or was she just an easy target for investigators desperate to close a shocking case? Think about it. The murder weapon was never found. No fingerprints, no DNA, no eyewitness. Everything rested on circumstantial evidence. The gun purchase, the affair, the movie rental. Powerful, yes. But is that enough to convict someone of murder? And then there's Paul Solomon, the husband. He had been cheating on his wife for years. He admitted to playing both sides, stringing Carolyn along, while keeping his marriage intact. Did he have more to lose than anyone else if the truth about his double life was exposed? Some believe Paul could have staged the scene to frame Carolyn, while walking away as a grieving husband. Even today, Carolyn swears she's innocent. She says she was betrayed, abandoned, and set up by the man she loved. But critics argue she's manipulative, still playing the role of the victim even after nearly 3 decades in prison. So, who do you believe? Was this truly a crime of passion? A young woman consumed by jealousy, snapping in a moment of rage? Or was Carolyn Warmus simply the perfect villain for the media to sensationalize, while the real truth remains buried? The murder of Betty Jean Solomon wasn't just the end of one woman's life. It was the unraveling of 3 lives, Betty Jean's, Paul's, and Carolyn's, all destroyed by lies, obsession, and betrayal. And that's what makes this case so haunting. It's not just about the bullets fired that January night. It's about the choices that led there. A husband torn between 2 women, a lover who wanted more than she was ever promised, and a wife who never knew the danger that was closing in on her until it was too late. So I'll leave the question to you. Was justice truly served? Or was this a story where everyone lost, and the truth may never really be known?